Hello, wrestling fans, and welcome back to another edition of NBC's 10 Count. I'm Steve Fall, but on today's edition, I am talking to singer, songwriter, and NWA owner Billy Corgan. Billy, how are you doing today?
I'm great, Steve. Thanks for asking.
Oh my God, it is so good to have you here. NWA 74 is around the corner. Two-day event, August 27th and 28th in St. Louis. Now, what can fans expect when they watch this two-day extravaganza?
Well, I don't know where to start. I mean, it's our biggest shows of the year. It's sort of where all the storylines culminate, and it's our biggest matches, our biggest stars over 2 days, and anything can happen. History will definitely be made. It's the NWA going into its 75th year, which is insane. 75 years of continuous operation, and I'm very happy to say that the company's sort of back on the highest levels. And when I bought it 5 years ago, no one thought it was possible, and here we are. So, international pay-per-view, talking to esteemed people like yourself. So we're doing something right.
Well, esteemed people like myself, I feel very special. I'll tell my wife you said that. But in 2017, you did purchase NWA, and you were involved with Impact Wrestling for a little bit. But why did you want to purchase NWA in the first place?
Well, I did try to buy TNA at that time, now called Impact, and I really liked the idea of taking over a wrestling company and sort of foisting my particular vision on it. So when that situation fell apart, I thought, okay, I'm done with the wrestling business. And then somebody came to me and said, the NWA is for sale. And I said, how is that even possible? Aren't there about 15 owners? It turned out at that point there was only one owner. So I purchased the company and began this long, arduous process of trying to rebuild it in the digital ecosystem, and with wrestling websites, and the WWE being a billion-dollar company. And since that time, of course, Tony Khan has entered the market with AEW. So it's a very interesting, quickly changing landscape, but very dynamic, and I'm excited to be part of it, and mostly excited to bring back the NWA into international prominence, because that for me is really quite an accomplishment in and of itself, because this brand deserves to go on to its 100th year at some point, hopefully way past me. And so I'm proud to be part of that.
That's outstanding. Now, originally, NWA has been everywhere. It's on YouTube, it's on Fight TV, but moving NWA content from YouTube to Fight TV, airing on Fight TV first, was that a business decision for profits, or was like you had a whole vision behind this?
Well, we did sign a deal with Fight, and I think we were the first time that Fight had ever actually signed a particular deal with the wrestling company. So there was some financial aspect to it. But at the end of the day, I think it was legitimacy of actually signing with a company that people said, okay, this is serious. He's going to continue this thing. And it seemed to kind of change the temperature around us. Up until that point, it was treated almost kind of a hobby, a niche,
Mm.
kind of rock star, kind of playing in wrestling world thing. And that all that conversation is now long gone, thankfully. It's really about the business and whether or not we're pulling off at the highest levels what we try to do, which is entertain people.
Of course. Now, are you looking at some point to take NWA beyond Fight TV? Because obviously we're in the streaming wars right now between, Peacock and Disney Plus and everything underneath the sun. I'm assuming the back catalog of NWA library must be it's beautiful.
Well, actually, truth be told, I don't own any part of the NWA library. The NWA in its heyday was probably owned by 7 different companies.
Mm,
So most of those libraries are owned by the WWE. There are some other libraries that aren't owned by the WWE, but those people don't intend on selling. I
wow.
control what is called the NWA Houston library, but I have not yet exploited that at sort of the level that the normal NWA is run. And yes, absolutely, we are looking for digital partners to go into the future with. It is an economic type of thing where you're trying to find enough money to come in to hire the stars that are available on the free agent market. The dynamics there, the salaries have changed, the talent available is quickly changing. But part of it is sort of building less, sort of like a consistent sports franchise. You have to build a consistent culture, having consistent office, and of course, key talents that the audience recognizes as NWA talent. So that sort of dynamic is something that we're still working on. But look, I can blow my own money into NWA all day. At the end of the day, what I am trying to do is sort of create something that people identify as being wholly of the NWA. When you think of wrestling, when you think of the NWA, you don't just think more wrestling. You think of they do this quite differently and they do it this particular way. And I think in that's where our worth will come.
So then, if you were speaking to just a normal wrestling fan who watches all the companies, how would you say NWA is different from the rest?
I think we bring kind of the old school toughness back into the mainstream. People confuse that with the idea that the product at times is presented in an old school way or a stripped down way. That more comes from my DIY rock background.
Hmm.
It's more like I'm more concerned about quality than necessarily presentation at all times. If you ask me, would I rather have a more expensive production or a better quality of wrestling? I'm going to choose quality of wrestling every single time. And I think we are competing at the highest levels on quality of wrestling. And and so that's sort of how we kind of made our name, and sort of grittier, tougher, meaner, faster. And that's kind of where we're going. And since we sort of figured that out in about the last year and a half, the product's really taken off.
Now, how tough was the pandemic to NWA's growth as a company? Because for so long, when NWA was starting up again with you as the owner, everyone was talking about NWA, and then boom, the pandemic just destroyed momentum for all companies, not just NWA.
Yeah.
How did that? How were you able to put your money in, or you were saying, maybe I should pull this plug?
I went through every iteration of that question. You know, I thought about getting out. I thought, how do I stay in when I can't compete against things like global governments deciding to shut everything down? Depending on where you were working, COVID policies. We even had an instance where we were working at a studio in Georgia. We set the whole thing up. We approved everything. And literally the day of the show, they said, you can only have 50 people in here. And we said, well, we've sold 200 tickets for a pay-per-view. We have all these people coming. They said, you're going to have to write them and tell me they can't come. So we put 50 people on television, with a bunch of empty seats. And then we got blasted by wrestling media for putting on a pay-per-view with a bunch of empty seats. We literally announced, hey, this is COVID policy. There's nothing we can do. Stuff like that was really, really hard to navigate. But here's the thing. The upside or the silver lining of it all is I really made a decision internally, and of course with my family and the people I trust in the company, that I was going to double and triple down on the NWA's future. And so in a weird way, by having to take a step backward, really evaluate my interest in the NWA, I've come back kind of a lot stronger than I was before the pandemic. And so it's been a weird blessing in disguise. It's nothing I would want to repeat, but having been through it, I think I made the best of it. And I think it really shows in how committed I am to the NWA in terms of what's coming out on the product side.
Yeah, I think everyone agrees with you. Nobody wants to go through that 2 years again, no matter what situation we were involved with, because that was awful. You bring up the wrestling media blasting you for putting 50 fans in the seats, but how do you feel the wrestling media treats the NWA?
I think it's gotten better in probably the last 6 to 9 months. I think it's gone from, hey, this is kind of cool. Oh, wait, he's never going to do anything big. We don't really have to pay much attention, to, oh, he's brought it back, but I don't really see much happening. I'm really not going to pay attention to it because there's all this other stuff to pay attention to now. And now that the quality level has risen to this other level in the past basically year or so, you see wrestling media go, okay, we're going to have to start taking what Billy is doing here seriously, because we sort of don't want to miss the boat. So it's gone through these weird iterations. I would say it's sort of a respectful kind of tip of the cap, sort of like, okay, this is serious. And now that they've seen the movement from AEW, they see the movement from other companies kind of moving and jostling in the marketplace, they realize that the NWA is going to be a player for years to come.
Yeah, I 100% agree on that. And you brought up kind of like homegrown talent, because this is something that I thought, I wonder what your feelings are. Heading into Always Ready, you had your champion Matt Cardona has a pay-per-view named after him. He gets injured at a different wrestling company's event. Now, are you more cautious allowing your champions to go off and compete in other of wrestling events? Because clearly this was just an awful, awful situation to happen, especially a pay-per-view named after Matt Cardona, and he's your champion.
I think we live in a different world now where we have to accept that a talent at the level of Matt Cardona, who is a free agent, who has made the choice to be a free agent, that's part of the dynamic of working with a talent like that. So it didn't really bother me that he got hurt in another event. Of course, it bothered me that he got hurt. I think what really matters is that Matt Cardona is the type of person who, even when he was injured, came to the pay-per-view. The day he had the surgery, raised the title in a promo and said, I will be in Knoxville at the pay-per-view, and was there and created part of the narrative that we needed to create a lineal succession with the title. That's the type of person I want to be in business with. And trust me, there are people I've had through the years under contract. They're not as loyal as someone as Matt Cardona, who doesn't have to work for me, is not an employee of mine. And yet he showed tremendous loyalty to the NWA and to the NWA World's Heavyweight Championship. So that is why I'm in business with Matt Cardona.
Yeah, I love Matt. I interviewed him twice, building up to Always Ready. And I talked to him before, and then I talked to him after his surgery, and he had nothing but good things to say about you and the NWA. He was not a fan, though, of Nick Aldis, and not at all.
I don't think Nick Aldis is a fan of Matt Cardona.
I don't think so either. And maybe there's a built-in storyline, maybe it's real, but Nick Aldis being pulled as the #1 contender for the NWA Championship belt, this creates quite a situation because for so long it felt like Nick Aldis was Mr. NWA. Now pulled from the main event, no longer on the card. What's the situation with Nick Aldis? Is he going to be at NWA 74?
Well, unlike Mr. Cardona, Nick Aldis is under contract to the NWA. And there are times where, as the face of the NWA, and Nick has been the face of the NWA, he has a different set of expectations on his shoulders, broad as they may be. So I took umbrage with the fact of how he was playing things in public. And yes, it was one of those kind of private things that spilled into the public sphere. It's fine. I love working with Nick. He's a tremendous talent. But there are times where I literally have to assert what is best for the NWA, and that was one of those instances.
Okay, because yeah, it's just, I remember I talked to Bully Ray earlier, and he mentioned, out of nowhere on Busted Open Radio, you just announced, hey, Nick's pulled, new match announced. And so everyone was kind of like, the guy who, at least from perspective of the outside looking in, is this guy's been carrying NWA on his back and shoulders for so long, and no longer is he involved. So I guess, is this a reality turning into a storyline turning into reality? Like, what is the situation? Is he gonna be back in NWA soon?
Let me sort of play on a musical riff for a second. Through the years, I've heard from fans, hey, they come up to me at an airport, hey, you are the Smashing Pumpkins. And I know what they mean, but I'm not the Smashing Pumpkins. I would like to be the Smashing Pumpkins. I wish I was recognized as the only person in the Smashing Pumpkins sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes.
Yeah.
I love my band, but there are times where I wish it was all about me, right? But the band is about the band. And there are times when you have to ask a particular talent to sublimate their own ego and their own self-interest against the bigger interest of the company, particularly the one they work for. And in this particular instance, I think Nick had been the company for so long that he started to assume that this company was his to run and not mine to run. And there are points where you just have to draw that line. The fact that I had to draw it publicly was unfortunate, but that's just wrestling.
Of course. Of course. And business is business. And sometimes as the owner, you have to make the decisions for everybody, not just one person.
What was Nick's faction called? Strictly business, right? So I was adhering to Nick's axiom, which is to make it strictly business. And in that particular instance, it was strictly business.
Now, through the pandemic, though, unfortunately, it seemed that some of the stars in NWA had other opportunities because the pandemic created that for them. Eddie Kingston, Ricky Starks, Thunder Rosa. And yet you allowed Thunder Rosa, when she was in NWA, to go off and defend the title and defend championships and wrestle everywhere else. So did the pandemic really show you that like some talent, like unlike Nick Aldis, are not contracted wrestlers, so they're going to be looking for the biggest payday no matter what, even what you give them? Like, is there an opportunity there to realize we need to lock down more people than letting them loose?
No, I think it's kind of opposite. I think what you want to do is you want to be in business with people who are sort of balanced in the natural world. Look, for an Eddie Kingston, for a Ricky Starks, when those opportunities came knocking, I congratulated them both and said, that's the reason I brought you in, because you had that upside. And so I like to think, however small, I was part of their reformation or putting them in a position where they could be seen and taken to the next level. And they've certainly done great at that next level. And none of that surprises me because I worked with those talents intimately. I think you can find yourself in a situation, and it's a bad analogy to make, but it's late in the evening. You can kind of get whack-a-mole sometimes with contracts where you think because you have people under contract that somehow you're going to sort of engender a particular loyalty with those talents. That has not been the case in my time, both in TNA and running the NWA. I think it's more of a character-driven business, and you want to be in business with people. There are people who work for me that get calls from other companies that are not under contract, They let me know, hey, by the way, so and so contacted me. Hey, by the way, so and so contacted me, and I told them I'm an NWA guy. I'm not going anywhere. Those are the people I want to be in business with, and it's wrong of me to assume that just because I have a contract, somebody would get that loyalty.
Hmm,
You see what I'm saying?
of
So
course.
there are times where you need people under contract, and there are reasons for that. But when you're dealing particularly with veteran talent, I don't think I think a contract is worth about as much as the paper it's written on. Because I have been in instances where I've had talent under contract and they were absolutely miserable because somebody else was calling and they wanted to get out the door. And they put me in a comfortable position as if suddenly I'm the bad guy because so and so, has visions of sugar plums and stuff like that. So, God bless. You know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
I'm a talent myself. I like to always point that out. I understand what it's like to be a talent. I've been a talent for over 30 years. I understand what it's like to have a contract. I understand what it's like to work for somebody that maybe you don't always want to work for. Building the culture of the NWA is ultimately more important to me than any one particular talent. And that's not to denigrate anybody. We have an incredible, fantastic roster,
Yeah.
absolutely world class at this point. But at the end of the day, if I have to choose between the culture of the NWA and a particular talent, I'm always going to choose the culture because I think at the end of the day, that's what's going to keep fans coming back. If I build a business where it's dependent on one star or one angle, I'm dead in the water.
Right. Because once that storyline or wrestler is over or leaves, and then it's like, well, okay, well, what are we left with? Um, but yet I know a lot of people want you to bring back the NWA Empower event, all women's pay-per-view. You have women's championship belt. You bring in the women's television championship belt. So every single fan, just like how they wanted WWE to bring out Evolution, they want you to bring Empower again one more time. Is this not in the cards?
No, it is in the cards. In fact, I saw a headline recently that said I don't plan on bringing Empower back, and that's totally false. What it was is we looked at Empower for this NWA 74 pay per view, and unfortunately, there's a paucity of female talent available on the open market because there's such a demand now for female talent, both with WWE and AEW, that there just isn't a ton of free agent talent available that can work at the television level.
Okay.
Is there enough talent? Absolutely. But you're talking about putting people on an international pay per view where you're asking fans to pay money. You're going to put on an all female pay per view. By the way, let's all remember if that pay per view doesn't go well, you put people in positions they are not ready for. It's going to blow back not only on those talents, but on the company. So we will definitely run another Empower pay per view. Absolutely. And hopefully next year. It's just one of those things where it's like it has to be the right time.
Mhm.
And look at all the people under contract with AEW and look at all the people under contract with WWE, and you recognize probably 80 to 90% of the top talent on the female side is already under contract with those companies.
I'm very happy you brought up that article because yes, I did see the same exact thing where someone tried to take one. You were interviewed by Digital Spy, and they asked you a question of just like how I asked you about Empower. You said one thing about how I would like to have it, and then someone took the other another clip of you saying, "Oh, well, there's not enough talent." And it was like they just tried to like fight the two clips against each other, saying like, "Oh, he wants it, but he doesn't want it." It's like, well, you know what? Business is business, and you make a very good point. Why would you put someone on TV pay-per-view but yet not have them be ready? And then every fan would turn around and be like, well, why'd you do that, Billy? Because you were begging and screaming for it.
Yeah, no, you have to be careful with those things. Look, when you put a spotlight and say this is about this thing, right? You're saying to the audience that we fully endorse what's happening and what we're doing is important for reasons beyond wrestling. And sometimes people get lost in that. In essence, they think the idea is enough to carry the let's call it the mechanical side of the presentation. I'm very concerned that the next time we do an Empower event, and we will do it, that it is good or better than, as good or better than the first one we did, which, by the way, is one of the most successful events we ever did. We trended worldwide #2 on Twitter. Not a bad thing to pull off for an independent wrestling company. Mickey James did a tremendous job putting together the roster, but there were other companies participating. There was a lot of negotiating that went on. There was a lot of horse trading. It wasn't in the cards for right now, but absolutely we will do it again, and I would love to do it again. I would love to tell you right now we're doing it again tomorrow. We're not there yet.
So I did see another article about yourself, which is very interesting.
Oh, here
That
we go.
yeah, no. The idea of the open market and how you had to make trades and deals to get all this talent onto EmPowerrr, and you do want it said in this is the headline, like you wanted a super event with all these companies working together to present a product that all the fans can enjoy. But at the same time, obviously, you don't want to look weak by being like, oh yeah, you can beat all my talent on my show, or you can do this because you're in this position. So is there an open door policy to work with other companies, or is that on pause for a little while?
No, absolutely an open door policy. I think you just have to be sort of the mind of understanding your position and their position. And if you can find common ground, of course, you're going to be able to do business.
Right.
You just don't want to be in a position where you're blowing up your company to try to create easy headlines. Oh, so and so and so and so are coming in, and da 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 da. In fact, there was a very interesting article today. I can't remember the name of the company, where the gentleman was talking about the effect of what's going on in the independent scene and the talent that's made available and fan expectations and how you have to manage fan expectations. I think it's the same thing. You can't necessarily put yourself in a position where you spend the whole year convincing your particular audience that what you're doing is important. And we certainly have the most prestigious title in all of professional wrestling, which is the 10 pounds of gold. You can't just sort of throw that around because somebody sort of is doing fantasy booking here on the sidelines.
Right. No, I agree. So what's the next step for NWA? Because is it creating new stars, traveling more, a TV deal?
Love a TV deal. Working on that as we speak. Next year, we're going to 5 pay-per-views a year as opposed to 4, and we will shoot more often, and so we'll be a little bit more compressed in our television schedule. So definitely upping the content. I think we're currently doing about 100 hours a year, and we'll be up to about 120 next year. So we're expanding. It's all good. I'm very excited. I'm very positive about the future, and when you tell people, like when I bought the company 5 years ago, you tell people, look, I had a 20-year plan. And I go, yeah, 20-year plan, sure. And then when they don't see stuff happen magically, they go, oh, yeah, so much for the 20-year plan. I think now people are starting to see I'm serious about the 20-year plan. And when people say, what's the goal? The goal is to bring the NWA back up to international prominence where you can look and say they are competing at the highest levels with the biggest companies in the world. And look, just play this game with me for 5 seconds.
Okay.
So far, the NWA is completely self-funded by myself. I'm the 100% owner of the company. If somebody came along, let's pretend somebody just dropped out of the sky and said, hey, I love what you're doing. I want to be in business with you. I'm a billionaire and I got all this money to blow. I want to be in the wrestling business. Let's go. You can see quite readily with the right resources and with the right television partners, whether they be digital or terrestrial broadcasting, the right application of funds in the NWA would go up like a rocket. Because it's already built.
Right.
It's not like I have to build it. It is built. It is ready to go. And everybody that I'm talking to on the TV side recognizes that it's ready to go. So all the questions and all the negotiations are about, well, what do you want? What do you need? What are you looking to do? But they're taking it seriously because I built it. Like the Field of Dreams thing. I have built it or rebuilt it. And so everybody in the television side recognizes that it's ready to go.
Of
So
course.
now it's just a negotiation of what happens in the next 12 to 36 months about who will be in business and what we'll do. And at the end of the day, if it doesn't work the way I want in this version of the world, but it continues to grow, I will continue to put more of my own resources in it, and it will grow that way. So either way, we're going to win.
Right. I think having NWA obviously back in prominence is good for everybody, including independent wrestlers from all different organizations. If there's another place to go that bring wrestling to fans and create money in business, then obviously that's a good choice. I like the scenario of a billionaire just dropping in the sky. Oh, hello.
Well,
And
I love it. I love it too. Every time I meet a billionaire, I do meet him in my walk of life. I always say, "Do you like wrestling?"
of course.
haven't met the one yet that likes wrestling, but we're working on it.
Oh my God. Well, I think when I would bring up certain names of companies, some people don't even know they exist, but they still know NWA. Like that's the thing. The lineage is there versus a company that might have started a couple of years ago. You say that name, they're like, I'm sorry, what's that? And they don't know. Even wrestling fans might know what it is, but the outside world does not know what certain companies' names are. They don't. And
Yeah. Well, we I call it the wrestling bubble, right?
of course.
We exist in this beautiful bubble where every little thing matters. What this champ said, what this company said, who's working to. Here's the scuttlebutt behind the scenes. Oh, who was agenting the match for SummerSlam? All that type of stuff. We live in that. 99% of America, and that's just America, pays no attention to any of that. They are mainstream fans, if they're fans at all. They have video games, the NFL, the NBA, Major League Baseball, and God knows what else, NASCAR and everything else. Not to mention their own busy lives. And oh, by the way, they have a telephone. They can sit on TikTok all day if they're bored. So you're competing against all this information. And the play I've always made, and I've said it, and now the wrestling bubble is starting to realize I wasn't just talking. The play for the NWA is a mainstream play. I love the wrestling bubble. I love when the wrestling bubble cares about what we do. And we have a lot worthy of the wrestling bubble. But the NWA is designed from the ground up to be a mainstream company again. And when we get there, all the things that I've done and all the weird things I've done will start to make a little bit more sense, because I'm not playing to the fan who's already a fan. I'm playing to the person who isn't currently a fan, a lapsed fan, or a fan to be, that won't find what they're looking for in the companies that exist. And the numbers indicate that there are a lot of people that are not interested in those companies. And that's not to denigrate those companies, because the argument is, and we'll never know until we get there, and I don't mean we, anybody, is the decline of WWE viewership, say over the last 10 years. Is that a reaction to the product, or is that a shifting tide of viewership?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
And they're the flagship example, right? We can look at 30, 40 years in numbers and see a decline in overall viewership per week, but yet we see a rise in revenue. So are they asking less people to pay more money, and are they willing to do it and travel to places and do all this crazy stuff? Maybe that is the business. Maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe the business will never go back to an 8 to 10 to 20 million people a week watching wrestling. My personal bet is when the international market clicks in, when the Indias and the Africa or whatever, pick your country, the Maldives, when they click in, they have not had wrestling the way we in America have had it. And like UFC, wrestling as we know it now in the 21st century becomes more of an internationally based product with internationally based stars like the UFC has done. You might see a golden age of wrestling that will dwarf what has come before in terms of sheer numbers. And let me use a music example. I used to say 10 years ago, people would talk about the biggest stars in the history of music, a Prince, a Michael Jackson, a Madonna, and stuff like that. I said, you wait until you find the first true Indian pop star that goes around the world and sells a lot. Little did I know it would be a band out of Korea called BTS.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you're a rock band in the rock business and you do somewhere in the neighborhood of $10 to $20 a head of merch, right? You're really doing something. You know what BTS does in merch? Last number I heard, somebody told me, was $46 a head.
And they're selling out.
That is merch like unseen ever in the history. You know what I mean? Of rock and roll history. I mean, those are like Elvis type numbers, right? So what I'm saying is, America has been very American centric on what works and doesn't work in America. As the global community comes on board, India, 1.6 billion people, has not had that wrestling moment yet. When they click in and they find themselves a mainstream product, hopefully in the NWA, we might see numbers out of India and the Maldives that would dwarf the American numbers that we currently have. And obviously WWE has been playing that game for years, flirting with the international markets and trying to figure out a way to create a hegemonic position, as they would always do, being the leader in the market. And so I think that opens things up and shows you that they're doing their research and they're poking around because they know there's money there to be had. And so if the American market on some level is on a particular, like, call it a cultural decline, like wrestling has had its best day, and yet it has a very fervent niche cult audience that will continue to watch. And we see it with the setting of the AEW numbers and the setting of the WWE numbers. In fact, some numbers have gone up recently. Yep. Let's say that's all tapped out and that's as good as it's ever going to be. You tell me no one's thinking about the other 8 billion people on the planet?
This is true. You can go back to like 1992 and look at the WWE looking into just getting out of America because of the business being so poor, but they were doing great numbers in Canada. So it was like, oh, in Europe, they were looking at the numbers being like, we're not doing what we did in America. We're kicking ass other places. Maybe we should go there and stay there. And maybe the world would be completely different with wrestling if that happened, but obviously it didn't. And here we are still to this day with them. But you bring up a lot of good points. You must have the numbers of how NWA does in other countries based off of your YouTube views.
Well, we have one fan in the Maldives. But we really appreciate
does it show one?
them.
Does it really show just one? Oh my
I
God.
don't know. I'm joking.
Oh
No,
my God.
listen, we're. It sounds strange, but we're more focused on what we're building than what we're doing.
Yeah.
Wrestling is a business that at the sort of the mid-level does reward spending money copiously, and you can create events where people will show up, but there's no sustain.
Mm-hmm.
Having come from the DIY side of the rock and roll business, I understand what it does, what it means to create sustain. And so, are we building something that will last, or are we building something that will be successful tomorrow? NWA 74, August 27th, 28th, uh, is a balance of what was, is, and will be. If it was just about right now, well, I would just pour a bunch more money into it, and you'd be like, oh my God, I can't believe Mike Tyson's going to be there, or whatever. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I would go into the open market and I try to create that sensationalism that you would create to get the common viewer to come in and pay attention. Would they come back again and watch Power on Tuesday? Probably not. I'm more in the business of trying to create sustain.
Yeah. Oh, NWA 74 has endless potential. So what do you think fans are going to take away from this 2-day event?
I think the fact that Camille and Taya Valkyrie are headlining night one is a huge deal. I think that is an extension of what happened last year on EmPowerrr. I think Tyrus has proven over the last few years that he is an international superstar. In
Mhm.
many ways, unlike any wrestling personality in the history of the business.
I
I mean,
agree.
he's a multimedia star.
Hmm.
In fact, the night before NWA 74, he just sold out a comedy show in St. Louis of 400 people, which, if you're a comedian, that's no mean feat to sell 400 tickets for comedy. Best-selling author, obviously a huge television personality, and a top professional wrestler. So he brings something to the table that in many ways, I don't think anybody's ever brought to the table. So I think you're seeing this kind of emerging different set of marketing factors, this different set of stars. We're cresting for the first time, I think, in the 5 years that I've owned the company, where people are starting to really understand this is the NWA, this is the NWA vision. And it is not like the other companies that are out there.
Well, I am so excited for NWA 74, August 27th, 28th in St. Louis. Oh my God, I am so pumped up. I cannot wait. I did talk to Bully Ray about him and Mike Knox, and he's saying, well, this could be a one-time deal, but could Bully Ray stick around?
I like having Bully around. He's a prickly personality.
Yeah. Oh, whoa, yes, he is.
He told me once, the first time he ever saw me in ECW locker room circa 99 2000. I believe in the Bully accent. He told me he wanted to punch me in the face because I was in his locker room. And here we are 20 plus years later, friendly, and I even call him a friend sometimes. Fantastic talent, Hall of Famer. Absolutely, I want him in the company if he wants to be, and that's kind of the thing I'm talking about. Like, could I put Bully under contract? Would he want to be under contract? I don't know. But does he want to be in business with me? And do I want to be in business with him? I'd rather be in that business with him.
Well, I guess we'll have to see what happens at NWA 74. Again, August 27th, 28th in St. Louis. Fight TV pay-per-view 2 nights. Folks, all the negative headlines about Billy, we've stumped them all here. We've taken care of it. He said what he had to say. So please, when this interview comes out, the articles won't say Billy said this, but he really said that. No, he said truly what he was going to say. So Billy Corgan, thank you so much for being here. Again,
Thank you,
I
Steve.
said singer, songwriter, owner of NWA, not just the Smashing Pumpkins. He is part of the Smashing Pumpkins. Don't
listen. Shouldn't the show be called 3 Count?
listen. I don't want to talk to you about why this name is 10 Count, but we'll talk about it after we're done here. Folks, I'm Steve Fall. He's Billy Corgan. I'm going to body slam him off camera for that comment. We'll have a great day. Have a great time. See you next time. Bye.